Hey guys, Scott and Todd here from the Volunteer Firefighter Podcast at DTFF. This month, which is May, is the Stop the Bleed month. So we thought we'd kind of catch you up to speed on some of the Stop the Bleed course. We're not teaching the course. We're going to show you if you were an instructor in the course, or maybe if you're going to take the course, at least have some idea what you're going to get into. We're going to show you some options on some videos you might be able to show and some of the stuff you can do. And later on, we're going to go to our training ground and do some live action, kind of those high fidelity sims like Todd always talks about, because that really reinforces it. I think one thing we understand is this course is strongly based on what the instructors do, because it's fairly basic. Stopping the bleed is a fairly basic skill, but it's all instructor based after that, just to make sure we get that reinforcement through that those sims.
Yeah, exactly. It's the program itself. When you get taught by an instructor, it's about a 45 minute to an hour long PowerPoint presentation, and we're only going to touch base with a few of those slides here. It's not going to be the full course, like Scott was mentioning, but we're going to really show you what you can do to spice it up.
Yeah. So basically, the way the PowerPoint's designed, this is for everybody. So this is for civilians, this is for soccer moms, all the way you can scale it to law enforcement. Law enforcement guys normally take the TCCC courses and things like that, but they could also take this course and get a lot out of it. So it's pretty scalable. So the opening title shot, obviously stop the bleed, save a life. Then we're going to the next. Sorry.
Just to add schools as well. Elementary schools, high schools. Stop the Bleed is really pushed for the Stop the Bleed kits in the schools, and we'll touch base with that in a moment.
So these are the organizations that have kind of gotten together. They've endorsed this. We're just going to skip through mostly the American College of Surgeons, American College of Emergency Physicians, National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians, and the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. As always, there's always a disclaimer in any of these courses. Some of these images shown during this presentation may be disturbing to some, and we're going to show you some of those images right now. So this is a good video that we always like to show at the start of these courses, because it kind of gets everybody focused on what we're here for. This is some of these videos were taken from a fellow named Skinny Medic off of YouTube. It's a really great resource. If you go on his YouTube page, show him some love, because he has got a lot of content. He does these after-action reports where he lays it all out. We've basically just taken the snippet for the video we want to show you. So this is a robbery suspect, I believe, out of Iran a few years ago. And the takeaway from this is when you hear the gunshot wound, that's when we're going to start a timer and we're going to see. So it's not about what's happening in the crowd. It's about when you hear the gunshot versus when the suspect is no longer able to care for himself. Imagine you were that person and how long you would have to put a tourniquet on or stop the bleed. So you can see the person has a knife. I think he actually cuts himself here a little bit. You can see a little bit of blood. This is an off-duty officer, I believe. He has a firearm. So the gunshot goes off now, so we start a timer. You already see pools of blood down here starting to form. The blood isn't necessarily spurting because he obviously has jeans on, and it's stopping some of that spurting blood.
It's soaking through the jeans.
No one's assisting him at all, but you can see he's still bleeding quite heavily, large pooling right here. So he passes out right there. So that's normally where we'd stop this video. So you can see he is no longer conscious, or no longer has the ability to self-rescue. And that's really the takeaway from this video. It's a good chance to show students and the instructors and everybody to get that mindset of we have to get that tourniquet on it or we have to stop that bleed quickly. Mm-hmm.
Time is of the essence.
I'm just going to show one more.
So when we talked about massive hemorrhage and stop the bleed, that's exactly what it is. Massive hemorrhage happens very quickly. These techniques will still work for a hemorrhage that will become massive if uncontrolled, but for these massive, like 39 seconds, you can start going into hemorrhagic shock and bleeding out. So they're very, very important on that time. We're going to stress that a lot when we start doing our high fidelity sims.
Now this one is even less time, so this really shows how quickly blood loss can result in unconsciousness or inability to effectively rescue yourself. The person we're watching here is this girl here. At some point here, I believe right around there, she gets shot or stabbed. It's not really clear in the video. And you'll see blood starting to flow already here. A lot of blood, a lot of blood. So right there, she's already unconscious. She's already basically unable to, maybe not unconscious, but she's unable to self-rescue. So in that short amount of time, which is probably only a few seconds, she's already went from fully conscious moving to basically out. So that's really important. And if we carry on with this video, we'll see the boyfriend, whoever it is, show up, and he doesn't really help. He just kind of freaks out and doesn't have appears to not have any medical experience. And basically, if you don't have that ability to stop the bleed, then you're going to have not going to be able to assist. Okay, so we normally show those first two videos just to get that that buy-in to start on the bleeding.
Yeah, number one cause of preventable death is bleeding. So we know that for trauma, the number one cause of death is massive hemorrhage, and we can prevent that by doing these techniques. So by wound packing, by direct pressure, and by tourniquet application. And time is of the essence. Scott was talking about kind of earlier on why Stop the Bleed has become what it is and why it's important to get out there. It is the civilian version of it, and it's very generic for all avenues of life. So our schools, our elementary schools, our high schools, community centers, large gatherings, and just personal care, like hunting. When I go hunting, I make sure I carry an IFAC bag with certain supplies.
Right, and like you're going to see some of our sims may involve a chainsaw, and people cut themselves all the time with chainsaws, and they're usually in the woods. They usually don't have that medical care urgently there. So these are all the locations that you would, emergencies, natural disasters, car accidents, all places where this information can be used. So first thing we want to do, our goals are going to be, first thing we got to identify, so we got to recognize life-threatening bleeding. So large pools of blood, heavy spurting blood,
soaking through a lot of clothes. So you saw in that one video of jeans, you start getting that massive blood soaking through. That's massive hemorrhage. So that's recognizing that bleeding, and what if it's just a small hemorrhage or massive.
And then that leads us to step 2, which is stop the bleed, of course. So we're going to take the steps to stop the bleed. There's essentially 3 things we're going to talk about, which is the first thing is going to always be direct pressure. That's going to be your first go-to. So pressure, basically pressure, and more pressure. Failing that, we're going to get into some wound packing, and then we're also going to discuss tourniquet application.
So again, being a civilian course, personal safety is number one. So the first thing you want to make sure, if you're injured, you can't help others. So you have to make sure yourself is safe. And then when it's safe, then go in and assist. A lot of the basis for this is those high-risk situations, like say car accidents, or where there's other hazards to yourself. Then we do talk about other terrorist incidents, whether it's involve shooting or vehicles into crowds. You have to make sure that environment is safe. So if it's unsafe, stop, move to safety, and then help when you can.
If you're able to, obviously get gloves on. And then nowadays you might even need a mask. We're in the middle of this pandemic. if you get blood on you, obviously you're gonna clean it off later and notify the EHS when they arrive. They'll probably be able to assist you get some of that off. Because as you can see from some of these videos, it is gonna get messy.
Yeah.
So the ABCs of bleeding control. So similar to the ABCs of first aid, ABCs of bleeding control. First, we want to alert 911. So if this is a civilian course that you're teaching or you're in, obviously you're gonna use your phone, dial 911. If this is for like firefighters, you're teaching fellow firefighters, you're teaching police, obviously they are 911. But if they're the ones that are injured, then they need to call either their dispatcher, they need to call for backup, maybe they need to do a RIT, Mayday call. So that's all associated with Let's Call 911. So a Mayday call is us calling 911. You're trapped in a building and something collapsed on you, and next thing now you're bleeding heavily.
Do we want to touch base real quick just on the march approach? So depending on civilian version, this is very good for the ABCs of bleeding. Then obviously if you're a responder, you want to follow your local policies and procedures. However, one very good one out there, and is very common, is the march approach. I don't know if we can see this slide here, but you've heard us talk about it in the past. So MARCH stands for massive hemorrhage, airway, respiration, circulation, and then head or hypothermia. That's a very popular one with military and usually most EMS agencies as well.
So as we talked about, first thing we're going to do is alert 911. Call 911, know your location, because that's important. Follow instructions provided by the 911 operator. Keep in mind, if you have a tourniquet on you, still to this day, a lot of 911 operators and a lot of even paramedics aren't necessarily big on the tourniquet yet. It's coming slowly. I mean, actually fairly quickly now. But for years and years, we were always told, don't use tourniquets. And I think that's definitely made a shift. And we're going to talk about that when we get into tourniquets more. But it's definitely done that shift. So they may not know. You could say, hey, I have a tourniquet on me. They may be like, well, don't put it on. But if you have training and you understand how it works, of course we should be using it.
Yeah.
So the next thing we do after we alert 911, we have to find the bleeding. So we're gonna locate the bleeding.
So on locating the bleeding, we want to make sure just if you see blood soaking through the jeans or the shirt or whatever, you need to expose that. Super important. You can't just peek around it or put your hand over top of that blood-soaked area. You need to identify where that bleeding is coming from. We need to find the exact area for that. So rip those clothes open, tear them off, cut them open if you have scissors around or a knife, so you don't stab or cut them. But you need to find and identify that source. So for a few things, one, you can see how big the wound is, what type of blood is coming out, if it's just a flow, is it an artery, is it spurting, and the volume of blood that's coming out.
And I think it's really important if this is a firefighter injured, they're obviously probably going to be wearing turnout gear, and that turnout gear is like a giant soaker bandage and just soaks up that blood. So we really got to cut and expose.
Yeah, actually that just reminded me as well. So the other one, a lot of agencies, even EMS agencies, I see this, they wear their tactical pants into their boots. They tuck them in or they tie them up tight. So these things are designed to be water resistant and hold fluids or repel fluids. So they trap a lot inside. So you may not see the actual true volume until you get that off.
Right. There also may be multiple places. So, most stabbings, a stabbing isn't just usually one. Like, it's not like it's usually like, they keep going. Correctional officers call it the prison sewing machine. They keep going, multiple wounds. So we have to find. That's why it's important to open that up, find those wounds.
Time of year, clothing may have many layers on as well. So really important.
So some of the areas you're going to find bleeding, you're going to find the arms and legs. So that's when you start talking about tourniquets. We're going to get into using tourniquets here. We can also use some wound packing and direct pressure. So basically, limbs are pretty much we can do everything on. We can do direct pressure. We can do tourniquets. We can do wound packing.
Absolutely.
Once we get into these areas called the junctional areas, so neck, armpits, and groin, obviously it'd be very difficult to tourniquet someone's neck because obviously if we tourniquet someone's neck, they're going to stop breathing. So we have to use wound packing and direct pressure. So those are what are referred to as junctional areas: neck, armpits, groin area. And then lastly, we have basically the chest in the body area. Now this gets a little tricky because if you start wound packing or obviously can't tourniquet full body, once you start thinking about wound packing, there's obviously a lot of void space for organs.
Exactly.
So you don't want to start sticking things into these areas.
Yeah, we don't wound pack any chest, absolutely not. Even the torso, there's so many large areas and cavities where you're just filling in into nothing. We do know that's a large area where blood tends to pool, or that's where that direct pressure as best we can. And there's tons and tons of evidence out there. Like if you get a major injury in your thoracic area here, you need a trauma room. You need a trauma physician immediately. So time is of the essence. Get 911 started. If you are 911, get the ambulance there so you can transport that person. But we need to control that, so we need that direct pressure.
Right. And one thing this course doesn't teach is the chest seal.
That's right.
Because it's not a way to stop bleeding. It's a way to basically mitigate the injury, I guess.
Yeah, we can show that. And
we'll show the chest seal a little bit, but it's one thing they don't deal with in stop the bleed is the chest seal. So that gets us into this. So once we've called out 911, we've found the bleeding, we now have to do what we can to stop the bleeding. So the first thing we're going to talk about is pressure. So direct pressure or compress we're going to apply direct pressure to the wound, and it has to be like direct, like not like just a little bit of pressure. It's direct, forceful pressure. So focus on the location of the bleeding. Use just enough gauze or cloth to cover the injury so you can see where you're at. And if pressure stops the bleeding, keep pressure on the wound until help arrives.
Yeah, so we want to identify that wound. We want direct pressure on. So with, again, safety with a gloved hand if you have it. If not, direct pressure with bare hands. If you have gauze around you or first aid kit, use that as well. But we want right on that wound, direct pressure. Lots of times 2 hands and push, and it's going to hurt. Communicate to them that this is going to hurt a lot and put that direct pressure on. If you have other gauze there, there's pros and cons of this. So again, when we start talking about direct pressure, wound packing is going to be a bit more efficient. So with this direct pressure, you need a very forceful pressure downwards onto it. If there is nothing around, you can use the clothing that they have on, a clean shirt or something, a rag to shove in that wound as well. Here we go, compress packing.
So before we get into packing, I'm actually going to show you one more video.
So when we talk about packing, it's important to get that gauze in very deep. You want to stick your fingers right in that wound and find that source of bleeding or the bone, and to start packing that gauze in or that shirt as deep as you can. And once that's all packing, which we'll show later on, you want to mound it and then direct pressure again on top. So the other thing with our direct pressure we talk a lot about is there's a lot of other people who are trained of throwing a knee on it for pressure points and things like that. Try to avoid the pressure points. Get those knees directly on that open wound.
So this is a cyclist. So this just goes to show you it's not about shootings and stabbings. This is just someone going for a bike ride. This is a professional guy bike riding.
Yeah, this is a really good video. It shows how fast it can happen. And this another great video with bike riding, many facets of life. It's not just your typical.
So that's his fall. That's all he did. But it appears he impaled himself with the handlebar. You can see it's already hit here.
Already soaking through his clothes.
Spurting. So he's giving direct pressure. His buddy comes in, starts giving direct pressure as well. It ends up not being enough. So he actually his friend does here in a second. So he actually gets his knee right in there. So you can see now he's got the knee right on there. He's giving a lot amount of direct pressure. In a second, here we go. And he actually hugs them.
Giving counter pressure.
Giving that counter pressure.
So when we talk about direct pressure, we're meaning a lot of pressure for massive hemorrhages.
So he ends up giving that pressure, and the medics arrive and they take him. And as far as I know, he survived. But it just goes to show, like, you have to, just sometimes your hands aren't enough. That knee
Use your
that
body
good
weight.
strong
Yeah.
pressure. All right, so
Backing.
yeah, so if the direct pressure isn't enough, then we have to get into what's called wound packing. So for large wounds, the pressure is not effective. So if pressure is not effective, like we're not getting that force down onto that artery, we're going to have to do something different, which is wound packing.
That's right. So you can see in this illustration here that when we put our gauze over top and just put direct pressure on, blood is still going to accumulate into that wound. It's still going to be actively bleeding, and it can still soak out and start leaking. So that's why we want to fill that void with that gauze and that wound packing material.
So these little videos, these come in the slideshow where we're just skipping past them because we're going to basically demo those same things. So if it was a true simplified civilian course, you can just run that video and it has all the information right there. But we like to get hands-on, we like to get in there. And we're going to talk about some props that you can use later. You can do the expensive props, or we can make some less expensive props. So for wound packing, you're going to be able to use the limbs and, like we said, the junctional area. The body, like we said, we want to try to stick away from, obviously, the
Thoracic, chest cavity area, yeah.
No, with the wound packing, there's lots of different packing agents. There's there's the hemostatic dressing, which is quick clot. These ones are inert.
Yeah, these are just trainers that you have. But there's a variety of material out there. There's the quick cloth, there's C-Lox, there's other brands that have the hemostatic agents. But basically any sort of gauze, make sure it's a good packing gauze. It doesn't need to have a clotting agent impregnated into it. So as Scott's opening up, roller gauze is fantastic. It's cheap. You can put it in all your first aid kits. I carry a pile of roller gauze in all my kits as well. The same with some of the other hemostatic agents.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with hemostatic is A, the price, because these are crazy expensive, and B, the fact that it will expire eventually. Mm-hmm. So you have this dressing that you may never use and it expires. So I think if it's your life, like if you're police or military guy, you'd be rolling with the quick clot. Mm-hmm. But rigorous civilian, probably all you're gonna need is this.
And a lot of the kits you just buy from over the counter generally only come with one in it. Yeah. Some of the wounds are very large. You're going to need multiple gauze to fill that void, to pack it.
So real quick on packing, we're going to get into this when we get out into the training ground, but there's a few different ways. Some people like you start with making a little bit of a kind of a knot. I don't know how you normally do it, Tom, but I normally start with a little bit of a knot, and I'm going to basically stuff it all the way in as far as I can. And then as I'm going, I'm going to trail my finger right behind it. So my finger, basically there's always going to be pressure on that wound, and it just keeps feeding it in. So it's never going to relieve that pressure on that injury. And I'm getting right down into that, where I can feel the artery, and keep packing. Basically I'm going to pack this whole thing, and then once it's packed in, any leftover, I'm just going to go on top, continue that direct pressure, and then we can start wrapping.
That's right. We'll get more into detail with a closer shot later on as well, but you want to make sure you have that finger in there at all times to find the seat of it and just use it as a guide and just start packing that in, and quickly too. Like, we're doing it slowly, but in real life time, you don't want to be doing it slow and there's active bleeding. You want to pack that sucker fast. Scott's got a great video showing some wound packing on somebody. It's a little bit slower, but it's a very controlled environment and not active bleeding.
Which we might get into in a minute. Okay, so we've talked about direct pressure, we've talked about wound packing, so now we're going to get into the tourniquet. So the tourniquet is, like we said earlier, it's kind of had a bad name for itself over the years. It's been around since Roman times, we believe, or even longer, basically since soldiers have been stabbing each other. So there's been tourniquet. Yeah, since they realize blood comes out of the body and they need to stop it, tourniquets have been around. Recently, since the global war on terror, the tourniquet usage has went way up, and they realized how important it is. So there's a number of tourniquets nowadays, which we'll talk about. But essentially, tourniquet application is the same everywhere. Now, the only one that's a little bit contentious is the where it gets placed, because some people say, you know, in this course in particular, it says 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Others say just high and tight. So if you're not quite sure where the injury is, or you know, you can't, maybe you can't look, like maybe it's a bullet, and a bullet hits the arm, hits the bone, and then ricochets and travels. You might have the wound site here, but actually the injury is up higher. So you can go high and tight. That's a quick application. High and tight, or 2 to 3 inches above the injury.
Yeah, high and tight is a very good general rule, and then it leaves you a lot of room to add a second tourniquet if needed as well.
Right. You don't want to place it over the elbow or knee, obviously, because that's not going to stop any bleeding, because you're trying to basically crush that artery against that bone, and it's going to be, you're not going to do that over the actual joints.
Exactly. The other thing to remember that with that one, when they talk about don't placing it over the elbow or knee, is pockets as well, right? Generally, if people are carrying a lot of things in their side pockets or their cargo pockets, make sure that stuff is out. Wallets, God knows what people are carrying. Make sure there's nothing in between that tourniquet application. If you can, expose the skin and put it right over top. If not, absolutely right over top of the clothes. But we want to make sure it's very tight and there's nothing in between the tourniquet and the victim.
So now it says tighten the tourniquet until the bleeding stops. So when they refer to bleeding, they mean that heavy flow. You're still probably like a venous flow. You're still going to get some blood oozing, and especially if it's a amputation.
Yeah.
The bone marrow itself is going to have some flow to it, but it's not going to be that spurting blood. Really.
That's right. You're going to see always a little bit of oozing, especially with the amputations. It'll eventually start slowing and clotting. However, you're looking for that sign of no distal pulse if the limb is still attached, or that massive blood loss is stopped.
And then lastly, once it's on, we don't remove it. And that's one thing I believe some first aid courses are actually teaching. You know, after 5 minutes, you open it up and you get the blood flow in.
Yeah.
There's a few reasons why we don't want to do that. One is because any clotting that you've already started, you're going to blow that clot out. And the second reason is you're basically, I'm not a medic, I don't know all these technical terms like Todd probably has, but basically there's going to be a bunch of shitty blood left, and you're going to, I don't know, you can probably explain it better than I can.
Yeah, the big thing is, I mean, so there's a lot of information in the past where we would apply a tourniquet, and then there's so many myths with it, and that's the problem. With tourniquets, everybody is afraid to put a tourniquet on because of all these myths. You're going to lose the whole arm if you put a tourniquet on, and then you have to release it to get some circulation back again. No, we're not going to do that because you're getting such a bad toxic blood flow. There's the perfect chemicals in there to come and stop your heart. And the other big thing is the clotting factors. Your body only has enough chance for one solid chance to start that clot. After that, we lose everything. So we go and release that. Maybe it's a major vessel in the leg, and it starts bleeding again. You're not going to clot. You don't have any more clotting factors left. So we're not releasing it. You're putting it on. It can stay on there as long as it needs to, up into the OR, and then under direct protocols, they can release that tourniquet.
You can apply it to yourself or others. So you can self-apply, which we'll show you in a minute, or you can apply it to someone that's down and needs assistance. As Todd already said, you can apply it over clothing, and tourniquets will hurt, so they're going to hurt a lot. So when you tighten that thing down, it's going to hurt because that means it's working. The second tourniquet may also be applied, like Todd said. We can, if one isn't working, we may need to put a second one.
I think the way Scott talks about tourniquets on. When you apply it yourself, you can say,
oh fuck.
Oh fuck.
And then you go
two more
another
times.
Another turn or two, yeah.
Here we go, tourniquets. Many different types of tourniquets. We've got a few different styles here we're going to show you. The blue ones are technically the training ones. However, there's a lot of evidence out there that there's no difference in the make of them to the real ones. Generally, what you see EMS carrying is usually the orange ones. There is the black ones as well, just because black's cool, everybody likes it, it's the tactical black, right? But they all do the same thing.
I've actually seen a lot of law enforcement now are starting to carry these because when you look at their belt and they're down, we can easily identify where the tourniquet is on a person because they have their bat belt going on and they have a lot of black gear. So they'll have their pepper spray, their handcuff pouch, their magazine pouches, and if their tourniquet pouch is black and looks the same, the only identifiable feature is going to be the fact that you can now see an orange tourniquet sticking out of that pouch. So it's really. I think it's important to have either an orange or a blue one. Like Todd said, they're the same tourniquet. They're just different colors.
Yeah. The other quick thing is for training purposes, the reason why they are the blue is because we don't want to mistake it and put it back in our real kit because the ribbon in here is going to be stretched over time and won't be as efficient. So that's why we know these ones are strictly for training. I'm not going to accidentally grab this black one and stick it back in my kit.
And we identify them on the time tags that they're training tourniquets, or you can write on them wherever. You can just make sure you identify that as a training tourniquet.
That's right.
Would it still work? Probably, but if I get shot right now, talking uses on me, but we don't want to have this on our person as our gear.
That's right.
So there's a bunch of tourniquets. Tourniquets right now are like the Wild West. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting tourniquets coming out. There's a list from TCCC that they put out every year of approved tourniquets. So is it law that you have to use an approved tourniquet? No, but you should probably use an approved tourniquet because that's the last thing you want to do is trust it, put it on, and the next thing it blows out. So you want to spend the $40 on a cat tourniquet or the $15 on some random windlass tourniquet. Okay. So the ones that are most common, probably the cat, that's what these are, is probably the main one. I'd say that's probably what most people are carrying, is the cat tourniquet. We're not endorsing any of them, but the cat tourniquet is probably the one you're going to see most people have. And then second to that is probably going to be the soft tee. So we have the soft tee, cat. The soft tee is this one. It's essentially the same, everything's the same design. But basically the soft tee is this one. This one's it's got the metal clasp. I always find it actually easier. This one's easier to put on with two people because you can unclasp it, hook it back up. But it's essentially this exact same design.
Mm-hmm. There's the big thing with tourniquets is whichever one either your agency has, train with that and use the same one. It's muscle memory. So they're all very good. They all do the same job, but try and stick to one. Use the ones that you're used to training with.
So the tourniquet itself is pretty simple. It's got the strap. It can you can fully open it. Weave it through once, and when you put it away, it should be ready to go. So you should have it kind of woven back on itself, because you want to be able to open it basically with one hand when you get going here. Because it gets stuck on the Velcro. So when the Velcro is brand new, sometimes it gets stuck. But you want to be able to basically open it up and have it ready to go. You don't want to have it in the package for sure. Definitely take it out of the package. You don't have it in its package, and don't have it all twisted up like this sort of thing. Okay.
So if you buy your own personal IFAC, like the ones we'll go over later, make sure you take the stuff out and take the protective wrappers off it, because your tourniquet is in a beautiful little plastic wrapper. Don't just go buy a bag and think, oh, I've got a kit, and now your hands are covered in blood and you can't take that plastic wrapper off. Blood is very slippery.
So other features, so we got the strap, this little tab here that's easy to grab for your pulling. You got the windlass, which is basically a stick. That's what's going to tighten that ribbon that Todd was talking about, tighten that ribbon inside, and that's what's going to basically finish off tightening down the tourniquet. And then you have your kind of your hook here for your windlass to hook into, and lastly you got your time tabs. Again, when you're putting your tourniquet away, don't do this.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that, think it's easy for to keep on the person, but what's going to happen is now you just tighten this down, and now you got to fiddle around trying to open this up to get your windlass going. So a good way to keep this secure is basically like that, and you can actually tuck it in, but just don't have the tab over it. So when we're actually applying the tourniquet now, what you want to do, so it's going to be open, it's going to be ready to go. Shake it out. Again, I just got stuck. So you're going to shake it out. Best rule of thumb is you're going to always pull towards your center line. So if Todd was applying it to me, he would pull it towards his center line. If I'm applying it to myself, I would pull it towards my center line. So if it's self-application, I go nice and high, I get the tab going, this is brand new. Okay, I get the tab going, I pull it tight. So you want this thing, this is important. So you want this as tight as you can get it before you do anything, before you start playing around with the wineless. Because this is just like the final tightening.
That's right.
You want to have it tight and get it to right about there. And then you're going to tighten it down a few turns. Okay, so like I said, it's going to be off fuck and then a couple more. So right now I'm at the off fuck stage. So I'm going to stop right there because we're going to talk a little bit. Once we get it locked in, we're going to bring this tab over, because if I was just to do this, sure, it's locked in right now, but if we have to get extricated, I have to get pulled somewhere. As it gets pulled, it might start to loosen, and then suddenly I'm like this, and Todd looks down and blood's starting to flow again. So we want to have it tight here, and we'll lock it in with the time tab. And what that will do is make it so this tab won't come loose anymore. Okay, so now it's tight. Right now it's a little loose because I loosened it, but that's where we want to be. Okay, so that's our time. We can write our time on there, and we're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Another little trick for putting them on. So play with your tourniquets before you put them away in your bag. So pull everything out, take the protective wrappers off them, and then Scott was showing the tab here. So a lot of them just come totally flat. So if the shit hits the fan and you're covered in blood and you're trying to grab it, it's hard to grab. So this is designed, you can just pull it up a little bit and still place it flat in your bag, but it's like a piece of tape, right? And you're looking for that damn edge to get that piece of tape up, you've got your tab here. So this little flap was designed to fold back onto itself and keep it there. And then it's a lot easier just to throw on. I can grab, I can pull it out, and then with this style, if you need to fully open it, you can still pop that back off and slide it through.
A few things. If this is your training tourniquet, you're going to notice after a few usages, you're going to get kind of a weird twist in it. So the only reason why that's happening is because that ribbon in there is getting wound back and forth. So what you want to do is undo it fully and just give it a pull and see how that straightens everything back out. So now you're ready to continue training. Obviously your actual tourniquet that you'd have in your kit is not going to be all worked like that.
Yeah.
But that's just the way, because a lot of people, you do it over and over again, and you're like, oh, this tourniquet's all messed up because it's like looking like this. So just give it that stretch, and then you can keep training with it.
That's right. What do we talk about? A couple different styles of tourniquets that we have here. So we went over the cat. Do you want to show the differences with the soft T? So we showed pros and cons to both. So choose the style that you think is going to fit best for what you're working with. A lot of guys I talk to, a lot of cops, they carry the cats, but they like the soft tees, because if they're injured and they have to put this around their leg and they can't get down to put this right around their leg and bring it up nice and high and tight, you need to pull it apart. And with these, it's hard to find that perfect little spot to connect it back through and back onto it. So
we're actually going to show a video of an officer trying to do that in here. So the soft tee actually has, like I said, it has a clip that you can unclip and then put it back on. So just can clip back on. It is a little bit finicky, so as a solo officer, it might be a challenge. But with your partners there, it's going to be easier for him to find that clip and pull it. It just locks into place. So that's really the main difference between a soft tee and a cat. It's got a little bit of a different hook here for the one that's to stay on, but essentially it's almost the same thing.
Yeah, a few of my law enforcement buddies really like carrying that style. But again, it refers back to what you train with and what you practice with. The other one here is the TMT. So very similar. So it's got the, this one, it's actually got a little rolled over edge, so it's easy to grab. And it's got the big old pull on it in case you forget which tab to pull. So it's the same thing. When you put it on, you've got your tab and you're going to pull to tighten. And then Velcro, I've got my windlass, I've got my strap to lock into place. And then the other thing that this has is very similar to the soft T is the hook that opens up and then you clasp right back on. That's the TMT.
And I think lastly we'll mention the wrap tourniquet. So the wrap tourniquet is not on the approved list as far as I know this year, anyways. The wrap tourniquet's kind of like people argue over it. People don't like some. People either hate it or they maybe not love it, but they like it. The wrap tourniquet it's good because it's very portable. Like you can put it in your pocket when you know you have it. The only reason why I would probably use it right now is for kids, for like little kids, because a regular cat tourniquet, if it's a small child, you can't necessarily lock it down tight enough to stop the blood, because there's a clasp there. So the good thing about the wraps is basically an elastic band. So you wrap it around and you just keep wrapping it, and then I'm not gonna do it tight, but then you cinch it off on these little horns here. So you can get a pretty good, pretty tight. I find it's not as effective on the leg because you can't get it tight enough. On the arm, I probably could get it tight enough on a child I could, but there's also that direct pressure for the child. So, I mean, one good thing about a tourniquet is if it's a mass casualty incident, you could do direct pressure, but now what just happened, if I'm the only officer, if I'm the only firefighter, if I'm the only civilian, I apply direct pressure and I sit there, and now there's 4 other people injured. So if I can get in here and I can apply that tourniquet and it stops the bleeding, I can move on. I can move to somebody else.
Exactly.
And I think that's the importance of any of these tourniquets is you can apply that tourniquet and you can move on to another person.
Yeah, the trick with all this stuff, and when you're being an instructor and teaching it, is you got to think of real world applications. Like, it's great to take a course and say, well, this is what you use, but that's why this is a good option for certain children. And of course, everything's adaptable. The size of the child is going to be adaptable. But you get some children that their arms, this is not going to go around. This is a little bit more pliable, the cat, but you look at the TMT, and this is not. This is a lot more rigid and very large. So you think of maybe your son or daughter's arm when they're at a very young age, that's very hard. That's not going to get that good seal. So children are very challenging when it comes to maximum hemorrhage control with tourniquet use. Now, that isn't your only device to use, right? We go back to compression and wound packing. So, but it's an option.
Okay, so this takes us to this video. This is the officer that, like I was saying, did I skip ahead? There's skinny medic right there. This is an officer that shot the suspect. Suspect actually ends up in handcuffs. So he's in handcuffs. They're searching real quick. See a little massive blood. He's got the tourniquet on his leg. Officer does.
Angle tourniquets. That's a cat.
So he has to open it right up like we were talking, and you'll see now his hands are blood on.
You see the flow and the large amount of volume on the ground.
So he's having some issues because he has to get that loop back through. That's reset.
Again, I've said it before, blood is extremely slippery when it's fresh. It starts getting sticky in a very short time, but in those moments, it's slippery.
So they put the tourniquet on and end up saving him, I believe. But you can see just how much blood flow that was there.
Mm-hmm. Many different styles of tourniquets. Find the ones that work for you.
Like we were talking about bleeding control in children and all, but the extremely young child, the same tourniquet used for adults can be used in children. So like we said, sometimes the cat tourniquet, stuff like that, cannot necessarily be used on a small child. The rat probably could be, or direct pressure. Mm-hmm. As it says here, tourniquets too big, direct pressure on the wound as described previously will work in virtually all cases. So what that does is it ties up that one person, so that one person has to stay there the whole time.
Mm-hmm. It's like any training stuff that we've talked about in the past. You know, it's a kit in your toolbox, right? The tourniquet has very good use for certain applications, but we've always got our other defaults, right? Direct pressure and wound packing as well.
And there's always talk on like what do we do with impaled objects, like anything else in first aid. We leave it where it is.
Leave it. Yeah.
Leave it. Pack it. Don't touch it. We make improvised tourniquets. There's lots of ways to do that. There's belts. Belts are hard because you can't get them necessarily tight enough. You can use triangle bandages.
Yeah. At the end of the day, where society's going, I think and what we're pumping is carry this stuff, right? Carry it in your vehicle. Carry it on your person.
Put it on your bag.
Yeah, have them on your bags. Obviously, there's going to be those situations where you're not going to have it, but we can always default back to that direct pressure and wound packing. But improvised tourniquets, yeah, if you're out somewhere, try it.
They talk about a loss of arm or leg because that was always the fear. You put a tourniquet on someone, their legs will fall off 5 minutes later. It's not the case.
No.
Most of the damage that is done was already done. So like a gunshot wound, the reason why the leg was damaged was because there was a bullet in the leg, not because of tourniquet. And ultimately, if the tourniquet did do the damage, would you rather be dead or would you rather lose a limb? Pain, they're going to hurt a lot. Other questions, so people always ask other questions in these courses. One thing some people ask is, can you combine the two together? Can you do a tourniquet and a wound pack? And there's an excellent video.
Absolutely.
Again, which, I don't want to screw it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Throw that tourniquet on, quick and dirty. It's going to stop that bleeding. You can wound pack afterwards. If the tourniquet doesn't work, go back to your direct pressure and wound pack.
Another great video. These guys are called Mosul Medic. They have a bunch of pretty good videos from the war. So this is one of the helmet cam footage. You can see a tourniquet getting applied to a leg injury. This is, I believe, one of the Iraqi police. They've applied the tourniquet. Injuries down here, you'll see they're going to cut the bandage off that they've applied in the field. So you see the tourniquet is doing its job because that wound is not, there's no heavy flow coming out of that wound.
Yeah, the key here too is before you take that dressing off, make sure you got something else in place. We're not checking to peek on it. We're putting the tourniquet on first.
Okay. Left leg. Under. And now.
So they're looking to see if it's a through and through. There's a sweet shot of some Nikes. Those are Nikes.
And lots of iodine. Not going to have that in your field.
Excuse me? Good. Bandage. Or not bandage, gauze. Here. No problem. That's it. Good.
So right now, so wound pack, and see how easy it goes in. That's another good example because people think it's going to be really hard to shove that in. Takes them 4 steps, but it really does go in quite easily.
No.
So again, we talked about wound packing very quickly in the field when it's actively bleeding. This he's able to take a lot more time because it's not actively bleeding, it's controlled. It's in a field hospital, so they're able to take their time a little bit more. But you need to get that packing into that wound. And he was using a hemostatic agent for that one as well. Blood loss. We didn't talk about blood loss.
No.
You want to touch base on it? We're going to talk more about it later on.
Yeah, that's the end of the slideshow anyway. So that's pretty much the end of the PowerPoint. Once you get to there, they just summarize everything. There's little notes at the bottom, like every other
Instructor
PowerPoint.
notes, yeah.
Instructor notes for you. It's a pretty good course. As you can see, it's fairly short, but what you add into it is what makes it, right? Like we said, you can add these little videos. These little videos aren't part of the course. Like we said, we could scale it. For teaching elementary schools, we're not showing them the person getting shot and dying in the street. We're going to show them some other, less graphic videos. Maybe not even show them videos. maybe just show them some of the they like these little wound packers and stuff. And even these maybe these are too graphic. We could do some of the other stuff like Todd has here.
Yeah, it's again, it's like anything. It's knowing your audience, right? So if you're going to be teaching in a school or younger children, or maybe certain offices or community centers, know your audience, right? Any good instructor should know your audience before you start teaching. So there's lots of devices out there you can either purchase or you can make your own, which we'll show. This is a really good leg for dry packing. It's wound packing, but it's not a wet presentation, which these are designed to actually put some fake blood through, essentially.
Now, if your budget doesn't allow it, so these are about what, $400?
Yeah, these are $400. They're pretty pricey little packs, but again, in my job, I was able to get some of these for some of my training I do.
So if you're in like a volunteer service or you're teaching like on the side for schools and stuff, these things are great. This is just a basic yoga block. Amazon for like $5 each. And if you break one, no big deal. And all we've done, yeah, they work really well. It's essentially like it's more rigid than this, but the best thing is you can use this over and over and over again. And like with these ones we've used probably 100 different people. So you just basically take screwdriver, knife, just try to figure out different wounds. You can have slash wounds, you can have gunshot wound, you can have whatever that is. And you basically just make these wounds, and you can make them dry, just the way they are. Like Todd was saying, this is a dry one, so you can just do some dry packing, or you can make it more entertaining and more that dynamic, high fidelity. Whereas we just cut a hole in the side, and you take a.
Yeah, you want to make these courses fun, right? You want to make them very interactive.
So we basically went and bought a $20 little sprayer that you get for in a garden center. I think it's about $20.
Yeah. Take
the nozzle off the end, cut your hole, shove it in, and the instructor can actually just give the flow while the student practices wound packing. And these things are great because you can take the nozzle out and you can use them later on some of the other sims we're going to do for down the training ground. So we're going to show you some of the other options you can use with this. So these for $30, we made a pretty good simulator of blood.
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there. This is what we started with. Scott made up a couple, then we started making the course, and we just started evolving from there. And the Stop the Bleed course is like the slideshow is a very basic, clean version for Joe Public. Where this course makes it is you need people to teach it that know the material, know the evidence behind why they're doing it, maybe have some very strong field experience, and then do these high fidelity sims. We're going to show you some of the things that we're going to be doing, and that's just a very tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that Scott does as well, but we're not going to show you all of it. What else?
I think, like Todd said, let's talk about some of the blood loss. We're going to get into it a bit more later, but essentially, in the human body, how much blood is there, Todd?
So, average adult, there's 4.5 to 5.5 liters of blood. And just before Scott goes on, so the importance of knowing that is we've seen how quickly people can bleed out. And the percentages of their blood loss really equates to the time we need to be doing this.
And I think the best way to show, we're going to show this later, but if you imagine 5 of these, and basically like a drink bottle, like a Pepsi bottle, and that's 1 liter if you're in Canada. So 1 liter of liquid it's pretty easy for someone to see that and be like, that's 1 liter. We had done some stuff where we got some of these
saline
bags. Todd got them, we filled them with some fake blood, and we were showing people these. Well, these people, it's hard for people to associate this with anything other than hanging from behind you where your IV's dripping. So it's hard for people to imagine how much that actually is. But then when you show them, well, it's 1 liter is this, and everybody's drank a liter of cola.
Mm-hmm.
so everyone can visualize how much that is. So 4 to 5 of these is all that's in the human body and the average adult. We're going to talk about what happens when we start losing that coming up here shortly. So,
and the other thing too is everybody can visualize this, but it looks so much different when it's spread apart on the ground. and we'll do that as well. It says you throw a little bit of fluid out on the ground, everybody thinks, oh, it's a huge amount, and it's only 250 mils. So it really changes your thought process on what's on the ground, so that's good. So the other little quick thing, so when we talk about hemorrhage control and when we're going to be showing you these techniques, make sure the participants are aware that, after about 20% in the average adult, you start getting into hemorrhagic shock. Now you start thinking about pediatrics, so 200 mils equates to 20% blood loss for them, and now they're going into hemorrhagic shock. So that's not very much. Can you start thinking about pediatrics? So even more of an urgency if you're dealing with children.
We talked about a little bit about IFAC, so we brought some stuff. This one's actually empty, but basically an IFAC is an individual first aid kit. Now you can go as simple as the little first aid kit in your car and add some tourniquet and a few wound packing things, or you can get a little bit more advanced. We have some of the pouches. 511 is great. They have lots of cool pouches, but there's various other companies that make pretty sweet little pouches. I think it's a 511 too.
That's 511.
Yeah, it's 511. In Todd's IFAC there, I don't know what you got. I haven't looked in yours.
So I have a few different styles of IFACs for different things. So this is one small IFAC I have designed to carry on my work bag with me everywhere. It goes everywhere I go when I'm working. It's also designed I can take it off and throw it on my hunting pack or whatnot. So, and this one is strictly for that massive hemorrhage. I've got 2 tourniquets. I've got a TMT tourniquet here. I've got a CAMT tourniquet here. I have some C-locks, so your hemostatic wound packing agents. I have 2 packs of that. And I also have a pair of scissors here. And I've got my modular bandage as well, which I will show. So that is all I have in this style of a kit. Then I have a kit that I carry on the seat of my truck as well. So this one's always with me. And this one's a bit more designed for the family. It's a bit of first aid and some major trauma as well. So again, I've got my scissors, I've got gloves, I've got some medical tape, I've got a tourniquet, I have some op sites, which are great to cover small little puncture wounds and also great for stab wounds if there's not a lot of blood loss. Finger lax, minor stuff.
So that's what you normally put when you're doing an IV, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the op site you'll throw over an IV site. I also have a chest seal. This is a SAM chest seal. And in the lower half is a bit more than minor first aid. So I've got my usual, just some steri strips, minor gauze, different styles of bandages. I've got some little saline tubes to clean. I've got some larger dressing, and I have some more roller gauze, and it doubles as wound packing. And in case of nosebleeds, I've got a nose clip. Again, this style is designed a bit more for the family, for when we're out and about. But I also have that major hemorrhage stuff ready to go.
Yeah, I think we both can carry these. These things are great. They're actually they're police and military design. They're kind of like my MCI bag. I think they're the same for you.
Yeah.
They're like an MCI kit because what they're designed actually for. There's inside here. There's a couple pouches, and they're actually made from magazines like AR-15 magazines, and then you'd add your little bit of medical. Yeah. But what we've done, they're up here. So what I've done, and I think what Todd's done similar. I keep this in the back of my car hanging, and the great thing about this is you can take this keeper off, you can attach it to your belt fairly quickly, and then you're ready to go. As I say that, fairly quickly.
Yeah, I'm the same as Scott. So this lives with me in my truck, and then I take it out when I go to work, and I put it in my work car as well. So obviously, being a medic, I have all my kits. However, this is a lot more versatile. If we ever, heaven forbid, get that active shooter type of scenario or mass casualty scenario, this is kind of my go bag. I can strap it on myself and go. A lot of my law enforcement people really like it as well. It works well.
Yeah, so normally you strap this in. I'm just not gonna do it right now. You can strap it in. It would be attached to your waist. I mean, you could run like this too, but that way it's here. You still got hands free to do pressure, dragging people, all that sort of stuff. And then from here, you can just the top thing. You can open it up. I got 3 tourniquets. I got 2 up here, 1 here. Some wound packing, chest seal, gloves, scissors. I believe that's it.
Yeah, I'm very similar. So instead of the mag pouches, because I don't carry a firearm at work, I've got another tourniquet. I've got a cat tourniquet here. I have some more. Oh, it's in there really good. I have some more trauma dressings. I have scissors. I have our March algorithms, just in case anybody wants to stop and read it in the heat of the moment. But that comes standard with the kit. But also comes in this kit is triage tags, which are very handy for those active shooter and MCI events. I have 2 chest seals. And I've also got some more rolled gauze, some quick clots, some gloves, some more C-locks, and some more flat gauze. And I also carry this handy dandy little thing. This is called an IT clamp. So what that is
You did it yourself.
I'm not doing it to myself. It scares me. So the IT clamp is good for junctional wounds. So say you've got large lacerations or puncture wounds in the junctional areas that we can't dress very neatly. So when you open this up, it's got very sharp spikes on either side, and it is designed to do exactly that, is to clamp down over the wound. So I will place that over the wound. I'll squeeze it tight and it'll actually seal the wound. There's a lot of cool videos out there. Again, it's just one of those devices. There's many companies that make these little devices. And yeah, just in case I need to put on somebody. I'm not putting it on myself.
Yeah, so I think that's basically a quick rundown on IFACs and some MTI bags. Yeah, so I finally got this thing strapped on. Yeah, like I said, you can move around. It's good. Just strap it in your belt and you're good to go.
Many different styles of bags. I have also a big trauma kit I carry when we go on big excursions as well. Yeah.
So I think it basically runs is the Stop the Bleed presentation portion. We're going to go to the training ground now and do some more of the hands-on, more of the high fidelity stuff. We'll show you some blood loss demo that is really reinforces that what blood looks like when it's out on the ground, like Todd was saying. And then we'll show you some sims that we do. And like you said, we can scale these sims. We can have them in a car accident for a civilian. We can have them a police officer who is shot. We can do a firefighter down. We can do a firefighter with a chainsaw.
Exactly.
All sorts of stuff. So we're going to show you some sims that we can do and using some very simple prompts.
Yeah. Yeah, make it fun. Make it very interactive, very hands-on. Know your stuff. Do those high fidelity sims. Get that set. That stress inoculation that Scott talks so much about, build it up to teach people. Obviously, I'm not going to do that to an elementary school child. However, when we do teach any sort of our law enforcement friends or anybody who are first responders that want to take part and have a bit more fun, that's where you really make your course. Anybody can sit there and go through a PowerPoint and talk about stuff. They have a little desk job and do it. However, being the boots on the ground type of people and getting dirty and having fun and making these sims wet and messy is where it's at.
Yes, off the training ground.
Yeah, let's rock.
Okay. Hey guys, so we're back at the training ground now, and we're gonna go over a bunch of different scenarios and things. But first thing we like to talk about when we're out after the classroom is the blood demo. And the reason why we do the blood demo, it's important because it shows what blood looks like when it's dumped on the ground or in a vehicle. And correct me if I'm wrong, people tend to over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate.
Absolutely, yeah. They can be a lot more hypovolemic than we think. Or the big one is there's so much blood there, there's a huge amount of blood. And then we find out later on it's actually quite a small volume. It's very deceiving. That's why this is very handy what Scott does when we show what it looks like on the floor.
So what we talked about in the classroom was we had a liter bottle, so Pepsi bottle. Now, if you're really on a shoestring budget, you can just use water and some food coloring, which is what's in here. If you got a little bit more budget, you can go to the $2 bottle of soap. So what it is, with the soap, it's a little bit more,
It's thicker. It's,
Yeah, it's
it's
thicker.
a better consistent that's equal to blood.
and in fact, what I'll do is I'll just demo, like, so without the actual talk itself, if I dump this out on the ground, it looks pretty good, and it spreads out, but it's really watery, and it gives that demo that we're looking for. But really, the thickness of a soap, and for a couple bucks, it's really gonna help. So you can just see that little bit I poured out, how wide that spread out. So if you walked in and saw that, a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, that's a lot of blood, but really not that much. So if I took the soap, same idea. What I'm gonna do is, if someone got an arterial spray and they start spraying on the blood, so I'm gonna dump, this is actually really thick. Okay, so this is a little thicker than it should be, but I'm gonna go, so this is 2 liters here in this container. That's about, it's pretty thick. So that's about 500 milliliters or a pint of blood. Now, when you go to a blood bank or when you give blood, you do about 500 milliliters or a pint. Yeah. So a pint of blood is all that is. Now, if someone walked in and saw that right now, and you see this, you go into a room, or you come upon a shooting and you see that looks like a ton of blood. And it is a lot of blood if I lost it as fast as that was. So if I lost it in that quick of succession, that's a lot of blood, and it needs to be mitigated. So we need to put that tourniquet on, we need to pack that wound, we need to apply that pressure. But realistically, when you lose this much blood, which isn't actually that much overall, because how much blood is in the human body?
Average adult is 4.5 to 5.5 liters.
Right, so we can survive through this, because when you give blood at a blood bank, they give you a juice, a cookie, and you're normally a little euphoric, but you can carry on with your day. You can, they make you wait around for a few minutes, but you can still drive, you can still text on your phone, you can still use your phone if you need to call 911. All those things that you do in your regular day-to-day life, you can still do them. So 500 milliliters of blood isn't really that much. But now if we didn't mitigate this and we carried on, and I keep losing blood, my blood is extra sticky.
This is actually a really good comparison, because when the blood goes on the floor, it'll start to coagulate, and you will get that thickness, and you'll get that those clotting factors on the floor as well. So this is a really good demonstration.
Okay, so we're sitting at a liter of blood now. So a liter of blood, it's a lot of blood. When you see this, and if the regular person sees this, or even a trained responder sees this, there's a lot of blood on the ground. And like we said, a lot of people will over-exaggerate this. They'll say that's all 5 liters right there. Reality, you can still function. You can still, you're going to be feeling it. You're probably going to be getting a little dizzy, I'm suspecting. Yeah. I've never lost this much blood, but you're probably getting dizzy, but you're still going to be able to function your phone. So still going to be able to call that 911, because it's important. If you cut yourself or sever an artery, first thing you should be doing is calling 911. Like pack the wounds tight, but call 911, because if you lose this and you start passing out, nothing's going to stop it. So you need that response. If you're a firefighter and you're inside, you activate the RIT team first, and then start mitigating that injury you have. So at a liter of blood, we can still function. It's when we start getting into this 1.5 liters, so we're about 1.5 liters worth of blood. It's really spraying now. Okay, so 1.5 liters worth of blood. So that's kind of like the cutoff point for us to be able to kind of effectively assist ourselves. So at this point, we're gonna definitely lose that fine motor control. We're gonna have tunnel vision. We're gonna lose the color vision. A number of other factors are going to start taking effect. We may not be able to identify friend and foe. So if you're a first responder, like a fire or a paramedic, and say Todd is a downed officer, well, so look at Todd is just going to sit down right here. He's going to take out the training gun. If he has his gun out, and I show up as a first responder, I have my backpack over my shoulder, and all he sees is this person in dark clothes. You know, I'm wearing tactical pants. I come in, yeah, I might have a uniform on, but he doesn't have color vision anymore. He's gonna be, I don't want to say panicking, but he's gonna have the adrenaline. He might not be able to identify me as another first responder. And if I'm another officer and I have a gun in my hand, all he's gonna see is that gun. So there's a good potential of a blue on blue of an officer shooting another officer. So a better way to approach would be from an angle. I'd be yelling at him first, because another thing, he's gonna get auditory exclusion, so he's not gonna hear everything I say. So I'm gonna be yelling at him. I'm gonna say who I am. Put your gun down. I'm coming in on your left side, so I'll be coming over here. I'm gonna come in on his left side, and I'm trying to make it as safe as I can, because I still have to help him. I'm not just gonna let him pass out. I'm not just gonna let him bleed out. I still have to help him if I feel it's safe. As I approach, so do I want him with that loaded gun in his hand? Not really. So if I can, and I understand the dynamics of a firearm, and if I can get him to give it up, I will. So that might mean lying to him a bit. Like, hey man, if I'm another officer, I'd be like, hey man, your gun needs fixing. Let me fix your gun. So I'm gonna take his gun away from him. I will drop the magazine away from his sight, rack it. Now he's basically got a hunk of iron in his hand. I'll give it back to him. So now he still feels secure. He still feels like he's in the fight, and I'm gonna be safe now. So that gun is now safe, and we can carry on with what we're doing here. Anything to add?
This is really good visual as well for newer responders who are coming. If you just see a pooling, it could still be an arterial flow, but it could just be a heavy venous flow. But if you start seeing offshoots where it's really spraying and splattering, you know there's usually an artery involved. Again, depending on the style of clothes, if there's multiple layers, or if you're responding to an officer with these types of pants, like the 511 pants, that material, it really holds that blood in. So just be very aware and look at the patterns that you're looking at as well.
So like we said, 5 liters, 4 to 5 liters is what the average human has. So it's really so this is a liter and a half when we kind of already talked about what happens with that. So once we get down to that last 2 liters, so once that 2 liters is gone, so right about there, so that's pretty much 2 liters. That is a ton of blood. So right there, for the most part, the patient is probably going to be losing consciousness.
Yeah.
They're definitely not going to be able to assist themselves anymore. And really the only thing that's going to assist them is a trauma center.
Exactly, and you got to think back to that 20% that we discussed about earlier as well. So 20% loss, that's when you start going to hypovolemic shock as well. So this is 2 liters. You think of your average adult being at 4.5 to 5. You're well surpassed that 20% now. So they're in serious condition.
Right. Yeah. So that's the blood demo. So there's several videos of different people doing this on the internet, including us now. So definitely take this. This is a really good thing to show to people if you're teaching this course.
I think the biggest takeaway too is a lot of the students, they really enjoy seeing this. It's a very good visual. I mean, we're all visual tactile learners anyways, usually, and this is a big takeaway.
Okay.
Hey guys, so some of the wound packing stuff here we're gonna cover for you. So if you do have a bit of a budget and you're able to purchase stuff, there's a lot of good product out there. So this one, of course, is very functional. It's a big GSW. It's got the bone in it as well. It's made by TrueClot. There's lots of different devices out there. It's very rubbery. It feels very similar if you're going to be pushing into somebody's body. These work really well. There is some other styles of kits out there depending on the types of high fidelity sims you want to do. This is a good one, which we haven't tried quite yet, but I have seen it in use. We're going to try it later on. This one, you actually don over one of your shoulders and arms, and you actually have to put the tourniquet application on to get the flow to stop. So but these are quite pricey. So if you do have some money and you're willing to spend, these are some good products. These are all the wet ones. If you recall, we talked about wet and dry. So there is these leg logs that are really good for just a quick demonstration in schools with some kids and stuff. They give you a few different options of puncture wounds and slashes as well. But these are not to be used with anything wet. So, wound packing, again, all we're going to do, here, Scott, I'll trade you a spot.
No, sure.
So if you can get your hands on just some basic roller gauze, works great for training purposes. Then you can get into some of the other training models. Again, it's money. So this is just an inert bleeding control dressing. There's Z-folded and there's rolled that you can get. But training purposes, these are the best. And when you're building your own kit, any sort of wound packing gauze like this can be used as well for your personal kit. That's what I have inside mine, and Scott's got some of his as well. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to identify that bleed, right? We're going to make sure everything's safe, 911's been called, or we are 911, we're coming in and helping. We're going to identify the bleed, so I'm going to cut and expose. I'm going to see that blood, so I'm going to identify the hole. Yeah, here it is. I'm going to stick that finger right in there. I can feel it feels pretty like a very large cavity. I'm going to take my gauze and I'm just going to start shoving it in. Some people, you can throw this down to the side or over your shoulder. I want to keep a finger in every time I do this, so I'm not letting up. And we're going to do it fairly quickly. And as you start filling that cavity with that gauze, it's going to start bulking up, and any excess I have, so as I start filling it, if I need more, I'll shove this in and I'll grab more. So now I've got excess amount. I'm going to fold it up over top the hole. I'm going to put a hand over top of it, a lot of pressure, maybe even two hands. I'm going to hold direct pressure very firmly for at least 60 seconds before I release it. And then I'm going to slowly release it after that time frame has passed. And then we're going to dress it with maybe like a modular bandage or some other nice type of S-march or pressure wrap at that point. If it starts bleeding again, try more pressure, or if you need to pack it more, go ahead and pack it more. And that is it.
Yeah, I think it's important to note when if you're the person doing the blood, is once if you can see them doing the demo right and they're doing the technique right, you shouldn't be like continually squirting the blood, because I mean this is pressurized. There's ones you can get, I believe, that will you can actually stop the bleed in there, but we just want them to get that proper technique, that muscle skill of putting that wound packing in. So don't keep you're not doing it right and keep spraying blood, because you're basically going to make them believe that this technique isn't working, and we know it works. We've seen when we watched a video of it working. So this is a great prop, and I believe this is a really good prop to do, obviously, one student at a time and in less kind of dynamic environments. And if you need to do a whole bunch, like if you're doing 15, 20 students, this is going to probably get pretty cost prohibitive. So what we did, like we talked about in the classroom, was we can make something out of a yoga block. Yoga block's good because you can reuse it, you can cut holes in it, and ultimately it's like $6. If it starts breaking down, if someone breaks it or you cut the wrong hole, you can throw away a new one. So what we've done is we got that $20 pump over there, and you can put it on the ground, and then we can take that next level up. We can take the next step up into that training environment of making the people do more realistic training. So I'm going to get Todd to do the same thing. Do you got a wound packing lesson?
Yeah, I got some right here.
So Todd's going to start over there, and what we would have done, we would have preloaded everybody. We would have talked to them about when you first come up, maybe you don't have your first aid kit out, but you still need to stop that bleed. You still need to get that direct pressure on. So we're going to drop our knee down on that wound. And what's going to happen is I'm going to start the flow. As Todd walks up, he's going to see that wound, and he's going to drop his knee down. So that's going to be that nice, sharp, direct pressure. He's going to access his IFAC, or in this case, just his pocket. He's going to get the wound packing material ready, and I'm going to stop the flow of blood. You won't be able to see it because Todd's going to be kneeling on it. And then, as he lifts his leg, I'm going to resume the flow, and he's going to do the wound packing he just did. If this was an officer, he would come in, same thing. He'd put his knee down, he'd have his gun out, put his gun away, take his knee off, start wound packing, and gun back out right away. So we can, like we said, we can scale this to any sort of first responder, any sort of civilian.
That's right. Just like that video we watched earlier with the mountain biker. The first thing he did was he threw his knee on, started getting that pressure, and then he counter pressured as well because it wasn't working enough. So it's the exact same principle. The first thing we want to be doing, if you can, is drop that direct pressure on it. It's right in those learning steps in the Stop the Bleed course. So get that direct pressure on first, and then start pulling out your gauze or tourniquet, depending on what it is, if it's a junctional wound or a leg wound or an arm wound.
So I don't even wait usually until the student gets ready. I just start going with blood, and he's gonna have to fix it. Come fix it.
So I'm gonna come in. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop my knee down on it. Thanks, Scott. I'm gonna pull out my wound packing. pull it off and see it's coming out again. Stick that finger right in, find it, I've identified it, and I'm just gonna start shoving this in. Finger, thumb, whatever is most comfortable. The biggest thing, practice, right? So now I'm starting to fill that void pretty good. These yoga blocks are fantastic for this because it's nice and tight. And any excess, I'm gonna fold and cover and then give them a direct pressure.
And for what we're using in these pumps, we're just using some water and a little bit of food coloring. It doesn't have to be super like bloody or messy because it just gets that memory and just gets that fluid, and you're feeling that feedback of that liquid.
Exactly. It's just another way to level up your training. Like you can literally start out teaching this course with these dry packers that we talked about, right? I could still simulate it and just do it dry, but as we know, especially firefighters and volunteer firefighters, we like those high fidelity sims. Make it as interactive and as realistic as you can. So when we do our scenarios, like Scott will teach, he'll have an officer down or a member down, and we go in, and then we'll have this beside them, and then they can pack it right from there.
Yeah, and then depending on where it is, like I'll make sure it's up, in that junctional area, because of course this is a junctional wound. I mean, you could still wound pack a limb, but we're gonna kind of identify it as a junctional area, so we can put it up by the hip,
yeah.
Have the person laying down, and then as they come in, they start wound packing. And maybe they come in and they're just a civilian and they're not prepared, they don't have an IFAK, they don't have gloves on, and maybe they just have a rag on them, or they have to rip their shirt. Okay, same thing. You're still going to go in. You're still going to go in and you're still going to wound pack the same way. Everything's going to be the same. It's just going to be a t-shirt now. Okay. It's going to be a little bit more rigid, and we're going to use the exact same method. Wound pack, wound pack, wound pack. Clean shirt. Anything to get in there. Anything to stop that.
And again, that's in the course material. So if you don't have any of these other supplies available, they tell you use a clean cloth or a rag or your shirt. Whatever you need to do. These are life interventions, life critical interventions, right? So we're doing that to stop this massive hemorrhage. The other thing to note too is after we dress it, we've talked about putting another dressing over top of it, or if it is just a wound where you can throw a tourniquet on, we're not just going to leave that wound alone. If you have time, as the other first responders are coming in, then you could still pack it afterwards if you have that supply still. You can still finish dressing that wound.
Okay, so one of the things we can do once we've taught the basic skills, we've taught wound packing, we've taught some tourniquet application. One of the things we haven't mentioned is we would want the tourniquet application to be applied several times in the dry land without any sims. They're just going to apply the tourniquet a bunch of times on arms, on legs. Some people even like to time them. So you time it. They should really be under 30 seconds. They should be able to get that tourniquet out of their pocket, wherever they keep it, and apply that tourniquet. So then what we can start doing is we can start adding layers onto that training, like we always talk about. And one of these layers is if we had a law enforcement course that we're teaching, we could have the law enforcement officer with his sim gun on, with his blue or red gun on, in their gear, and the scenario would be they come across a downed civilian or a downed officer, and I'd have my firearm out. I'd see him down. He's still awake. I can identify that he's probably still a viable candidate for rescue. So I'm going to have my gun out, and we talk about all this beforehand. We talk about CASEVAC, so casualty evacuation, how to get them into certain areas, because we don't want to stay here in a possible hot zone. We want to get them into the warm zone. Ideally, we want to get to the cold zone, but right off the bat, we want to get them into the warm zone and start applying that tourniquet or doing the wound packing. So the scenario would be something like this. We'd have our gun out. I'd punch out. Todd, give me your hand. So he's still awake enough. So he's going to hold on to my hand. I'm going to have my gun out. And if he's still awake enough, he's actually going to use his leg to assist, his non-injured leg to assist. Pull. I take one more quick peek, run away. If I'm with a partner, I could call for cover. And then the partner would step up, covering, while I'd come in. I'd come in right away, do that knee on the injury, access my tourniquet. Now, like we said, there's a couple different ways to do this. You can undo it, hook it underneath, and secure it that way. We saw from that video of that officer doing it to that suspect. It got a little dicey because he lost kind of positive control of it. It's blood slippery. So I might be able to just get it over his leg and move it up. So again, if the injury is here, we want to go a few inches above. Now it's going to be still high and tight. So we're going to go nice and high. I find where the strap is. Remember, pull it towards yourself. So we pull it. I do want to have the windlass available, so we pull it towards ourselves as tight as I can get it. Wrap it back around. A few turns. Strap it on. We're good. I can see that it stopped the flow. Right away, my gun would be back out and wait for backup, or we move them to that hold zone. Anything to add, Todd?
No, I think that's good. So the key points still apply as always is you start with that direct pressure like Scott did when he dropped his knee, then apply that tourniquet.
And I think you can even add a layer. Maybe you could say, hey, that first tourniquet was ineffective. Put the second tourniquet on. So one thing you saw me do, I accessed my personal tourniquet. Ideally, if this was a downed officer, I would access his tourniquet first. His tourniquet's for him, my tourniquet's for me. But if his tourniquet wasn't good enough, I would probably access my tourniquet and apply. Ideally, I'd have a second tourniquet on me, so I'd always have two, or he'd always have two. But civilian, life over limb, we believe the threat's down. I'm gonna apply my tourniquet to him.
Again, layer your training to the audience that you're teaching, right? Like this one, when we're working with law enforcement, you can really layer this, like Scott was saying. You know, do the basics, start with this, then add some more layering on top.
I mean, we can get right into sims. We could get right into simulation guns. We could get into shooting RBTs, and people are shooting back, and we're shooting at them with basically paintball rounds. Drag them into a position, and have cover, and do the full 9 yards. So it's really that layering. This is just options that you can do for this course. So this course starts off. You can be as basic as you need to, or as advanced as you have to. We can do, like you said, we can do elementary school kids all the way to higher level law enforcement. And then once you get to that really high level, they're going to start doing TCCC, going to the gun range, that sort of stuff.
And again, this is a great course with the basic functions of the Stop the Bleed for your first responders. Work with your other fire departments, your fire department, if you're on a small volunteer department. Include your EMS, your paramedics, right? Involve them in all this training. And it's a great skill to reinforce the skills that a lot of these officers may already have from their TCCC training. Again, this isn't that course, but it's a lot of the same skills, and it's good practice. It's like fire practice. We need to continue to train to keep our skills up, and we're just assisting them in that training.
Okay, so to add on to another level now, what we're going to do is we could be inside of this area, like we have. This is our search building, but for law enforcement's sake, we could use this facility for that, and we could have them doing a building search, searching for a suspect or searching for maybe an active shooter. They come across a downed patient. The rest of the team, right now I'm by myself, but the rest of the team would carry on, and maybe one officer would stay and address that injury, or the officers would go shut down the threat, and then they would come back and address the injury. Depends on policies. So what we can do is come in. We get the officer to come in as though they're searching. They're coming in, they're searching. They identify the patient that's down. Another quick check. A holster. The rest of my team would cover me. Drop my knee like we talked about. On injury, I can identify right away. It's up high, so it's one of those junctional injuries. Get my wound packing material. Great thing is we're using our demo from earlier, so it really adds that extra level. As soon as I take my knee off, he starts that flow again, and I start my wound packing. And then when my partner thinks I've done enough, he stops the flow, and I can see it starting to cease. So to me, I'm like, okay, I'm doing well. A little bit more. And lastly, I put this back on, knee back on, firearm back out, or maybe my team has said it's clear, and I can carry on and I can wrap the injury. So it's just another one of those sims we can add, one of those high fidelities that we can do for any layer of whether it's police, law enforcement, fire, HS, any of those people. Okay. Anything to add?
No, absolutely. Think outside the box, right? If you're a fire department doing it and you're working with other agencies, and they're already fairly skilled and it's a good training exercise, introduce some smoke machines,
sure.
Some IEDs if you got a police team coming in, get them to utilize some of their training.
You can use cell phones with speakers, just some screaming,
Yeah, smoke alarms, trips and smoke alarms, so they're going off. If it's nighttime, have your strobe lights going on your equipment, right?
Yeah. You know, if you're volunteer fire department in a rural area, you can talk to the local, you know, drama department. We've done that. Get the drama kids in. They always love doing that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, when we did the RTAC course with Dr. Nick Sparrow, their students were awesome. They had to draw a lot of kids in there acting, and it adds that level of heightened awareness, right? That stress inoculation that we talk about. It just makes it a lot more realistic, and it's fun. It makes you think, it gets your heartbeat going when there's actually somebody there screaming that you don't know. Right.
Okay, so ramping this training up another step, we've attached the True Clot tourniquet, the arm injury, which basically was strapped in onto Todd's arm, and in here there's like a soft,
small soft tubing.
A soft tubing that once the tourniquet's actually applied, it will stop the blood flow. So again, this is one of those scenarios where we could be teaching a civilian, and we're in the fancy RV. This is one of our RVs that we use for training. Maybe he was chopping some wood. He's out camping, chopping some wood, ends up somehow severing his artery. Or we could also have this as a first responder call. The firefighters or the paramedics show up, and the blood's going. So in this instance, we're just going to say he's a civilian. He's cut his own limb. He's made it back to his RV. He's managed to access his first aid kit, and from here, he's gonna get this thing going first. So it's got a good flow, good. Start cinching it down.
Remember, we want to go high and tight, right?
So again, it looks like a lot of blood, but we saw how much that really would be on the ground. So maybe not even half a liter yet. So he's still got lots of time.
And this is slippery, I can tell you right now.
Tightens it down, and you can see the blood starting to cease.
There we go.
And you could probably go tighter if you needed to, but you know, it's
again, training purposes, right? Like you can cinch this pretty tight.
It's got a good pad on, right? So right there, I still have the pressure going, and he's totally stopped the arterial spray. And that's all we got left. Just a little bit of trickle. So again, training props. You can spend some extra money, get really good training props, and these things are obviously, you can use them over and over again. They're great. You can put them in any sim you want. Put them in car accidents sims. You can do active shooter stuff. You can do civilian courses. Yeah, pretty much sky's the limit. Anything to add?
No, I think yeah, you nailed it. Like I said, sky's the limit, right? Like when you're thinking training, think outside the box. Think what you can make it fun and realistic, right? Once people get comfortable with doing more scenarios, step up your game even more, especially if you're working with law enforcement or other agencies, to do that combined training we talk about. That's where you can really have fun.
Okay, so another sim you could do is for civilians. You can gauge this as they're just in a motor vehicle accident. Have them have a backpack with them, and they'll have their tourniquet in their backpack. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that layer, and we're basically, we've had one of those pumps, but rather than the blood and the food coloring, we just have straight water, because it's still that feedback of that liquid, of that kind of visceral sensation. Yeah, visceral sensation of the liquid. It doesn't have to be red. It doesn't have to stain their clothes. It's just that feedback of them going, oh, there's something there. I'm now getting wet, and it's going to add some slipperiness to their hands, and it's just, even if they get hit in the face a little bit with it, it's going to be that realism, right? So essentially, what's going to happen is I'd be sitting here, I was just in an accident, I got my seatbelt on, and the instructor is going to start just as soon as I feel the wetness. Okay, I feel I start bleeding. I start reaching for my tourniquet. Okay, he's going to keep getting me wet. So right now it's that extra pressure. Now I can't get my leg down, so I'm gonna have to open this up. So he's getting me in the face a bit. So because I've taken my hand off. Okay, so we're gonna go here, nice and tight. As soon as I'm gonna go a little higher because I was too low. Tight. As soon as he sees it's tight, he might slow down on the bleeding. I haven't really secured it yet, but it's still gonna be going a little bit. Now I tighten it. Tighten it down. Time. Okay, so I got a little wet, no big deal. I'm not covered in blood, but it's that feedback of that liquid hitting me. You know what? And it felt pretty weird. It felt pretty crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're not yelling or screaming at him yet, and we could add all that stuff.
Yeah, again, back to the layering that we talk about, right? You know, this is a good practice as well just for your fire departments. You know, up your game in your patient extrication for an auto X. You know, throw this in. Have the person or a family member
running the pump.
Yeah, running the pump and in here and add that high stress, you know, that yelling, that screaming, so you're under the gun to do it a bit more. So whether they're applying it or we're coming in and applying it, it's just it's another layer of training.
Right. Okay, so again, we've added more layers on now. Since we are the Volunteer Firefighter Podcast, we're going to do some fire scenario. Essentially, what we're going to have here is we've just had an active shooter. The police have cleared it. We're going to go in. We know there's a patient down in there, and we're going to go in and we're going to deal with the situation. So for our situation here, I'm going to add the iPro. I'm going to add an RZ mask or any type of medical mask. Just not only because we know it's a medical call, but also it adds that extra stress level to the student of covering their face. You could use the SCBA as well. I'm just going to take my strap, and of course I'm going to add some gloves. I would like to add medical gloves, but for this instance, I'm going to add just some rescue gloves. Again, to make it a little bit more difficult on myself. In addition, we're going to add some sound effects when we're in there. And it's going to be dark, so I got my helmet on. Okay, so let's go see what we got. So we're moving in. We know it's clear in here. So we're moving into our search building. So here, I can see it. Get me out of here! Gonna apply that pressure. Find my tourniquet. Jesus Christ, I got shot! And pull it tight. Switch it off. Get me out of here, man. Then we got the tourniquet applied, and then from there we can do our medical. We can move into a safer location. We can apply the bandage, we can do lots of stuff. So that pretty much wraps up the Stop the Bleed program and how you can make it as least advanced and as advanced as you want to. So again, like we said numerous times, you could layer it to elementary school kids, all the way to law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, and some of the scenarios we did. We can base it for civilians, we can base it for first responders. The sky's really the limit, and really this course is, I think, strongly based on instructors.
It's very instructor dependent. Yeah. The Stop the Bleed program. Like I said, there's a lot of different instructors out there that like to use just very simple props, which is fine. Mm-hmm. However, again, it comes back to the layering we talk about. You know, cater to your audience. Any good instructor needs to always cater to their students. So. Yeah. If you're doing schools or younger people, those dry props that we showed are great. Even the wet ones are simple, just for on top of a table inside. But if you want to step it up even more to your first responders, to your departments, other law enforcement to back up their training that they've had, these are just some of the scenarios.
Yeah, it's all about stress inoculation. So even little kids, you maybe even add a timer on some of those things, and
yeah.
They'll at least get them a little bit of stress, because it's important. Stress inoculation is important. We know that.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is too is when we talk about Stop the Bleed, like we show a lot of just scenario-based stuff with law enforcement and firefighters, but this program is really designed for everybody. When you're out mountain biking, you're out hiking in the woods, hunting, any sort of outdoor sports, these skills are going to carry with you anywhere.
Right. Yeah, so if you're interested, stopthebleed.org.
Yep, that'll give you the base info on to find out where the instructors are in your local area. Once COVID-19 lets up and you start doing the classroom sessions again, they'll let us know, and then that instructor portal will probably
we'll come back up, and you just take a look. Maybe you're already qualified to be a Stop the Bleed instructor. You just have to take the course and then have certain parameters. But if you're police, law enforcement, police, EMT, certain levels of fire, you can become an instructor and take it forward, because they really just want to expand. That's all they're looking to do. Yeah. It's important. And like we said, if you're police and you're interested, you do the basic course, go do that next level, which is a TCCC.
Absolutely.
Stay safe.
Stay DTFF.